Hi, welcome back to Immersive English, where you can immerse yourself in English to a variety of topics. Today's episode, we will talk about how your thoughts quietly build the life you're living right now. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. How much of what happened to you today did you actually choose? And how much of it came from a thought you didn't even notice you were having? Most people believe their life is shaped by big decisions. A new job, a big move, a bold conversation. But for most of us, the real shaping happens somewhere much quieter. It happens in the small, repeated thoughts that run in the background of our minds all day, every day. I'm not good at this. People are judging me. I'll never sound natural in English. These thoughts feel small. They feel harmless. But they are not harmless at all. If you've ever felt stuck in a routine, stuck in a level of English you can't seem to move past, stuck in a version of yourself you don't fully like, the problem is rarely a lack of motivation. It's rarely bad luck either. Something quieter is usually running the show. In this video, you'll learn what that quiet thing actually is, why it has more power over your life than you think, and exactly how to interrupt it, starting today. This isn't about positive thinking or forcing yourself to feel confident. It's about noticing a pattern you've never really looked at directly and learning how to change it, one small moment at a time. Let's start with the real problem, because it's probably not what you think it is. The thought you never question. Here's a fact worth knowing. Your brain runs on repetition, not on single big moments. A person who thinks I always freeze up when I speak isn't remembering one bad moment. They are replaying that same sentence to themselves, quietly, dozens of times a week, without ever noticing they're doing it. That sentence becomes the lens they see themselves through. This is the real problem. Not laziness, not bad luck, not a lack of talent. The real problem is an unexamined thought, repeated so often it starts to feel like a fact about who you are, instead of just a sentence you said to yourself too many times. Think about how this plays out. If you believe I'm not a confident speaker, you don't consciously decide to avoid speaking up in a meeting. You just quietly find yourself staying silent. Again, if you believe I always mess up under pressure, you don't plan to freeze during your English conversation practice. You just do, because your mind has already rehearsed the outcome hundreds of times before it happened even once in real life. Most people try to fix their results. They try to fix their confidence, their motivation, their schedule. But results are just the visible tip of something deeper. Underneath every repeated result is a repeated thought, and that thought is usually running on autopilot, completely unexamined. This is actually good news, even though it might not feel like it yet. If the real problem were your talent, your personality, or your luck, there would be very little you could do about it. But a thought is not fixed. A thought is a habit. And like any habit, it can be noticed, interrupted, and slowly rebuilt. That's the shift this episode is really about. Not forcing positivity, not pretending everything is fine. Just learning to notice the sentence running in the background of your mind so you can finally choose whether it deserves to stay there. Now let's look at how this plays out in a real moment, the kind you've probably lived through yourself. The night before the presentation. Imagine you just found out you have to give a presentation at work tomorrow. It's not your first time speaking in front of people, but something in you tightens the moment you hear the news. That night, one thought quietly takes over. I'm going to mess this up. You don't say it out loud. You barely even notice you're thinking it, but it's there, running in the background while you're making dinner, while you're lying in bed, while you're scrolling to your phone instead of sleeping. Here's what that one small thought actually does. Because your mind expects things to go badly, you don't feel like rehearsing out loud. Rehearsing feels pointless if failure already feels certain. So you skip it, and you just read through your notes silently instead, telling yourself that's close enough. The next morning, you walk into the room already tense. Your shoulders are tight. You avoid eye contact because some part of you is bracing for a bad reaction before anyone has even responded. Your voice comes out a little flatter than usual, a little more hesitant. And by the end, the presentation goes exactly the way you expected it to. A little awkward, a little forgettable. Was this fate? No. It was a chain reaction, and it started with one repeated thought. The night before, the thought didn't magically create the outcome. It shaped your preparation, your posture, and your energy, and those three things shaped the result. This is the real mechanism behind the idea that you become what you think. It isn't magic. It's mechanical. A thought repeated enough times changes your small daily actions by about 1% at a time. You skip one rehearsal. You avoid one moment of eye contact. You hold back one full breath before you speak. None of these choices feel important on their own, but stacked together, day after day, they quietly build the version of you that shows up in real moments, including the moments that matter most. The good news is that this same mechanism works in the other direction too. If a repeated thought can quietly shrink your preparation and your presence, a different repeated thought can just as quietly build them back up. But before we get to changing the thought itself, there's something else worth understanding first. Why these thoughts feel so convincing in the moment, even when they aren't true. Catching the thought before it catches you. You have probably had a thought like this before. I always sound stupid when I speak English. Notice something about that sentence. It isn't phrased like an opinion. It's phrased like a fact. The same way you'd say, it's raining, or the meeting starts at 9. That's exactly what makes it so powerful, and exactly what makes it so dangerous. Your mind treats repeated thoughts as evidence, even when there's none. You don't ask yourself, is this actually true right now? In this specific moment? You just accept it. Because you've heard yourself say it so many times before, this is overthinking wearing a disguise. It doesn't feel like overthinking. It feels like self-awareness, or even honesty about your weaknesses. But it's neither. It's just an old sentence, playing on repeat. Here's the shift That actually helps. The next time you catch a thought, like I always freeze up, or I'm terrible at this, pause for 1 second and ask yourself a simple question. Is this true right now, in this exact moment? Or is this just a sentence I've repeated so many times that it feels true? That single pause changes everything. It moves you from reacting automatically to choosing consciously. You're not forcing yourself to think something falsely positive. You're just refusing to accept an old, unexamined sentence as fact, without checking it first. This is also where ego quietly gets involved. Sometimes we hold on to a negative thought because it protects us from trying and possibly failing in front of others. If you already believe I'm bad at speaking, then a bad presentation confirms what you expected, and somehow that feels safer than trying fully and still falling short. Notice this pattern in yourself. It isn't weakness. It's just a habit your mind built to avoid disappointment. And once you can see it clearly, you can start to work with it instead of being controlled by it. This brings us to something just as important as catching the thought. Once you notice it, what do you actually do with it? The answer might surprise you, because it isn't loud and it isn't public. The work nobody sees. Here's something worth observing. The people who successfully change a repeated thought pattern rarely announce it. They don't post about their new mindset. They don't tell their coworkers they're working on their inner dialogue. The real work happens quietly. In ordinary moments, nobody else is watching. Picture someone trying to change the thought, I always freeze up when I speak. They don't fix it in one dramatic moment. Instead, they start noticing the thought each time it appears. Maybe during a meeting, maybe while rehearsing English out loud, alone in their room. Each time, they pause, question it, and gently choose a more accurate thought instead. Something closer to, I get nervous, and I can still speak clearly anyway. Nobody sees this. There's no audience. There's just a private, repeated choice, made again and again. This quiet, unseen effort is exactly why the process works. Growth that matters is rarely built for an audience. It's built in the moments when no one is checking on you, and you choose to do the small work anyway. Here's something you need to expect, because it changes how you handle it when it happens. 1 week into this practice, that same person might catch themselves thinking, I always freeze up again, just as automatically as before. This is not failure. This is not proof that the method doesn't work. Old thought patterns took years to build, and they don't disappear after a few days of noticing them. A setback here isn't a wall blocking your progress. It's simply part of the terrain you're walking through, and walking through it is what builds the new pattern underneath. Constraints and limitations work the same way. A moment where you freeze up, forget a word, or feel awkward speaking isn't proof you're failing. It's information. It shows you exactly which thought is still running in the background, so you know precisely what to work on next. So the responsibility here is simple, even if it isn't easy. Nobody else can notice your thoughts for you, and nobody else can choose to question them for you. That part is quiet, private, and entirely yours. Now that you understand the real problem, the mechanism behind it, and how to catch the thought and do the quiet work, there's one more piece left. and it's the piece most people skip. Interrupt it today, not someday. There are two ways to approach a repeated negative thought. One way is to wait. Wait until you feel confident. Wait until you feel ready. Wait until the thought naturally goes away on its own. The other way is to interrupt it today with one small action, even while the thought is still there, and even while you still feel unsure. Only the second way actually works. Waiting to feel ready keeps the old thought exactly where it is, because the thought only changes through new evidence, and new evidence only comes from action. If you keep waiting to feel confident before you speak, you'll be waiting for a feeling that can only arrive after you've already spoken, not before. So here's what action over planning actually looks like in real life. It's not a dramatic overhaul of your entire mindset. It's small and specific. The next time you notice the thought, "I'm going to mess this up," you don't need to erase the thought completely. You just need to do one small thing anyway. Say the sentence out loud, even if your voice shakes a little. Send the message, even if you're not sure it's phrased perfectly. Speak the English sentence, even if you're certain you'll get a word wrong. Each time you act despite the thought, instead of waiting for the thought to disappear first, you send your mind new evidence. Slowly, the old sentence loses some of its weight, not because you argued with it and won, but because you simply stopped waiting for its permission. This is the 1% shift in action. You don't need a perfect plan or a completely rebuilt mindset by tomorrow. You just need one small, imperfect action today. Repeat it again tomorrow, and again the day after that. Here's how to actually put this into practice, starting right after this video ends. Before you go, here's something simple you can use immediately: the 3-second check. The next time you catch a negative, repeated thought about yourself, whether it's about your English, your confidence, or anything else, stop for 3 seconds and walk through 3 quick questions. First, is this thought actually true right now, in this specific moment? Or is it just an old sentence I've repeated many times before? Second, what small action could I take right now, even while this thought is still here? And third, what would change if I acted anyway, instead of waiting for the thought to go away first? You don't need perfect answers. You just need to ask the questions. That 3-second pause is often enough to interrupt a pattern that's been running on autopilot for years. You don't need a completely new personality to change your life. You don't need to wait for a burst of confidence that may never fully arrive. You just need to notice one repeated thought, question it honestly, and take one small action anyway. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. And it starts with the very next thought you catch yourself thinking. If this episode helped you see your own thinking a little more clearly, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more episodes like this one. Let me know in the comments which lesson from today stuck with you the most. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.